Have you ever heard a voice that sounded just like yours? I work nights at a local UPS warehouse. Not glamorous, but the pay's solid, and I actually kinda like the rhythm of it. Everyone keeps to themselves, and the quiet helps me think. Usually, I'm one of the last guys out since I clean and lock everything up. This happened a few months ago, and I've only told 2 people about it. I still think about it at least once a week, and before you assume, no, I wasn't on anything. No lack of sleep. I was completely sober just like every night. But what happened that night still messes with my head. It started like any other shift. Boxes, belts, caffeine. I was halfway through a podcast, just moving packages through the scanner. At around 2:15 a.m., most of the crew had already clocked out, and I was alone in the northeast corner of the warehouse where we store the overstock. That area's always colder for some reason. Even in the summer, it's got this weird, drafty feeling, like the air doesn't move right. Anyway, I was stacking a few boxes when I heard something behind me. It was my voice. Clear as day, my exact voice, saying my own name. Derek. It was quiet. Flat. Like how I'd say it if I was calling out to someone I didn't really like. At first I froze. I turned around slowly, expecting to see one of the guys messing around, maybe playing my voice through a speaker. But there was no one. Just stacked pallets and dim security lights flickering overhead. I stood there for a second, waiting to hear it again, but nothing came. I told myself it was the podcast glitching, maybe jumping back in the episode. I popped out one of my earbuds, but the podcast was still playing, and they weren't even talking about anything close to me or my name. I shook it off and went back to work, but 20 minutes later, it happened again. This time, louder. Derek! It wasn't coming from behind me, though. It was to my right, just past the rack of damaged parcels. Again, the same exact tone. No inflection, just my voice calling out to me like it was trying to get my attention, or maybe mock me. Now I was creeped out. There were only 2 other guys still on the clock. One was sweeping by the loading dock, and the other was in the break room. I checked. Both of them said they hadn't left their spots in a while. No one had a Bluetooth speaker, nothing that could have explained what I was hearing. I told myself again it had to be the podcast or something weird with the acoustics in the warehouse. It's got high ceilings, metal walls, weird echo pockets. Could have been a truck backing up and I misheard it. But then, just after 3 a.m., something else happened. The intercom clicked on. That's not super weird. Sometimes the night manager will use it to page for cleaning or notify if there's a security sweep. But this time, there was no announcement, just a breath. It sounded like someone had pressed the button and was just standing there, breathing. Long, shallow inhales. No talking, no static, just listening. I walked over to the console and stared at the mic. The red active light was on. No one was near it. And then I heard it again, this time through the intercom. Same tone, same voice. Derek, come here. But it wasn't just creepy because it sounded like me. It was creepy because it didn't sound played back. It sounded live. I stepped away from the console and checked the hallway that led to the offices. Empty. The main lights were off and no one had passed through the motion sensors, but that voice kept echoing in my head. The way it paused after saying my name, like it was waiting for a response, like it was daring me to answer. I didn't sleep when I got home. Couldn't. The next night, I was on edge. I didn't even wear my headphones. I wanted to hear everything. Every click, every shift, every noise. The first few hours were uneventful. I started to feel stupid about being scared. Told myself maybe it really was just a prank, and I overreacted. But around 1:40 a.m., one of the pallets collapsed in the overstock section. Just came down on its own like it had been nudged. That's when I noticed something. The CCTV monitor by the break room was looping back and forth. Usually, it switches between feeds every 10 seconds. But this one was stuck. It kept showing the camera from aisle 6. The footage showed a man standing perfectly still in the shadows behind one of the shelves. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He wasn't moving. He was just watching. I thought it was frozen, but then he blinked. And the worst part? He looked exactly like me. Same hoodie I wore the night before, same hair, same stance, but his face was just blank. I ran to aisle 6. Of course, no one was there. When I got back to the monitor, the feed had returned to normal. Now I was panicking. I called one of the night leads who worked the week shift and begged him to check the cameras from the previous night. Told him I thought someone was breaking in. I didn't want to say I'd seen myself. I didn't want to sound insane. He told me he'd check and get back to me. At 4:15 a.m., I got a text from him. It just said, "Dude." What the hell am I looking at? He attached a screenshot. The image was from the loading dock camera at 2:37 a.m. the night before. It showed someone standing at the very edge of the loading bay, just outside the security fence. The figure was tall, thin, back turned to the camera. The lights were casting long shadows, so the details were hard to make out, but there was something wrong with the stance. Too rigid, almost like a mannequin. Below the image, he sent another message. "Have you ever sleepwalked?" I haven't. Not once in my life. I left work early that night and told my supervisor I wasn't feeling well. The next few days, nothing happened. I took a couple shifts off. When I came back, I avoided the northeast corner. I started sticking close to the break room or the active loading zone, where at least one other person was around. Then, one night, I got to work and noticed something on my locker. Taped to it was a photo, a printed still from the security cam. It was me, asleep in my car. I recognized the hoodie I wore last Thursday. The photo was taken through my windshield. My eyes were shut, my mouth slightly open. Someone had taken a picture of me sleeping and had access to the internal camera system. There was no note, nothing written, just the photo. I reported it, of course. The warehouse manager said he'd look into it. Security did a sweep, changed the alarm codes, checked the door logs. Nothing showed up. No break-ins, no employees staying after hours. I asked for the security footage from that night, but they told me the camera system overwrites every 72 hours, and the locker footage was already gone. Funny how that works, right? Now every time I'm there, I feel it. Not a presence exactly, but an echo. Sometimes I'll hear a footstep behind me when I know I'm alone. Or I'll hear someone mumble my name from behind a stack of parcels. Always soft, always my own voice. I don't even respond anymore, because part of me thinks that's what it wants, to answer, to follow the voice, to meet whatever, whoever it is. And maybe the scariest part? I'm starting to think it is me, or some version of me. One that never clocks out, one that watches from the other side of the cameras, and every night I get a little closer to hearing what it's going to say next. But I don't want to know, because if it ever says anything other than my name, I think I'll finally answer.
If that last story didn't rattle you, this next one just might. Imagine waking up in a hotel room and realizing you weren't alone, and never were. What would you do if the thing inside didn't need to knock, because it was already inside?
Have you ever been in a hotel so quiet it almost doesn't feel real? I travel a lot for work, mostly corporate audits, which means long weeks alone in rented cars, airports, and cheap hotels. You get used to the blandness. Every room smells faintly like carpet cleaner. Every continental breakfast has the same stale bagels. It all blends together eventually. But last February, I was sent out to Boise for a last-minute job. There weren't many hotels left that week. Some tech conference had filled the city. So my company booked me into this older place on the outskirts of town. Not a chain hotel, just one of those generic off-brand inns with the word suites in the name, even though there's nothing suite-like about them. When I pulled in around 9 p.m., the lot was empty. And I don't mean slow night empty. I mean no cars. Just me, the receptionist's beat-up Subaru, and a row of flickering parking lights. The guy at the front desk was in his 50s, balding, and seemed like he hadn't slept in a few days. He checked me in without much small talk, gave me a key card and told me I'd be in 204. I asked if the place was under renovation or something, since I didn't see anyone else around, and he just said, "Nope, just you tonight." That was the first red flag. The second was the elevator. It worked fine, but when the doors opened on the second floor, the hallway was pitch black, no motion lights. I literally stood there for a few seconds, waving my arms like an idiot, before one overhead panel finally buzzed to life. The hallway smelled like old mop water and something faintly sweet, like a candle that had burned out hours ago. My room was at the far end. Keycard worked fine. The room was fine. Old carpet, heavy curtains, one of those noisy under-window heaters that kicks on like a lawnmower. I dropped my bags, plugged in my charger, and collapsed on the bed. Here's the thing, I always deadbolt hotel doors. Always. I don't care how safe the place looks. It's just habit at this point, so I know I locked that door. I watched some YouTube, texted my girlfriend, and eventually drifted off. I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. I didn't hear anything. I just woke up, like something tapped me on the shoulder in my sleep. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. But here's where things start to get weird. My suitcase was open. I hadn't touched it after dropping it beside the bed, but now it was unzipped, clothes folded out onto the floor, like someone had been searching through it. I sat up, confused. The light by the entryway was on. I was sure I had turned everything off before bed. I always do. It's part of the wind-down ritual. Lights off, curtains drawn, charger plugged in. But that light was on now. I got up slowly and checked the room. Nothing was missing. The door was still locked. The deadbolt was engaged. No windows open. Nothing broken. It didn't make sense. I checked the closet, the bathroom, under the bed. Nobody. I stood there in the middle of the room, trying to convince myself that maybe I had just forgotten. Maybe I had opened my suitcase before bed and just forgot. Maybe I'd left the light on. I've had long weeks before. I was tired, jet-lagged. I eventually turned the light off and climbed back into bed. But then, as I was lying there, I heard footsteps, not above me, not in the hall, in the room. They were soft, like socked feet on carpet, moving from the bathroom area toward the desk, then stopping. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to listen, trying to feel if there was anyone else in the room. But I didn't hear the door open. I didn't hear the heater kick off. And then, the voice. It came from inside the room, from the corner by the closet. Just one word. "Hey." It was low, calm, male, not loud enough to wake anyone in another room, if there had been anyone else in the building. I froze. My entire body tensed up. It didn't feel like sleep paralysis. I could move if I wanted to. I just didn't want to, because if I moved, if I sat up, I'd have to see what was there. The silence stretched on. I didn't breathe. After maybe a minute, I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and flipped on the flashlight. The room was empty. Every corner, every crevice. Nothing. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed up with every light on, heart pounding, watching the door until morning. Around 7:30 a.m., I went downstairs to the front desk. The guy from the night before was gone. A younger woman was working now. I asked her if they had surveillance cameras in the hallways. She looked confused. "No," she said. "Why?" I asked if anyone had access to master keys for the rooms. She told me only housekeeping, and the front desk had that, and housekeeping hadn't come in since it was a slow week. I asked if anyone else had checked in after me last night. She clicked around on her computer and said, "Nope, still just you." That afternoon, I got reassigned to a different hotel closer to downtown. I didn't argue, but 2 days later, I got a call from the same front desk. The older guy from night one. He asked if I'd accidentally left a shirt behind. I told him I hadn't, that I'd checked everything twice. Then he said, "Well, we found something weird." He paused. I waited. "We found a note under the mattress in your room, folded. It was written in all caps. Just said, 'I stayed in your room too. Thanks for the bed.'" I felt like ice was crawling down my spine. I asked if he was joking. He said no, that they were turning it over to the manager, maybe even the police. I asked if he'd checked the cameras in the lobby. He just sighed and said, "We don't have cameras." To this day, I don't know if someone actually came into my room. The door was locked. The bolt was set, but something about that night felt wrong, like someone had been there already, maybe hiding before I even walked in, maybe in the closet, maybe under the bed, and whoever it was, they didn't need to knock, because they'd never left. Hotel nightmares are one thing, but deep in the woods, there's no front desk to call for help. This next story takes us to a remote campsite where something was waiting just beyond the firelight, and it smiled like it already knew you. Have you ever looked at someone and just known something was off? Not because of how they dressed or spoke, just something in the eyes. Like they knew something they weren't supposed to. Or maybe you weren't supposed to see them at all. This happened 2 summers ago. My girlfriend at the time and I were doing a little cross-country trip. We weren't hardcore campers or anything, but we liked the outdoors, hiking, stargazing, disconnecting. You know, we were somewhere in Wyoming, heading toward Grand Teton, and stopped for the night at this remote, government-run campground. It was nothing fancy. A gravel loop with maybe 8 or 10 tent sites, a single bathroom structure in the middle, and that was about it. No ranger station, no cell service, just forest, mountain air, and the occasional screech of birds we couldn't name. It was already past 7:30 p.m. when we pulled in, and there were only 2 other sites occupied. One by an older couple with a huge truck camper, and another by a solo hiker guy who waved at us from behind a propane stove. We picked a spot tucked into the trees and started setting up the tent. That's when I saw her. A girl, maybe 12 or 13 years old, wearing a white shirt and baggy gray shorts. She was just standing on the trail, maybe 30 feet from our site, facing toward us. Not moving, not walking, just watching. At first I thought maybe she was with the older couple, a granddaughter or something, but when I looked again, a minute later, she was gone. My girlfriend saw my reaction and asked what I was looking at. I said nothing, because, well, it was probably nothing. A kid exploring, or maybe I imagined it. We'd been driving all day, I was sun-drained and hungry. We finished setting up the tent, ate some leftover sandwiches, and tried to enjoy the quiet. It actually was pretty peaceful out there. No traffic, no generators, just wind rustling through pines and the occasional crack of twigs. The couple turned in early. The solo hiker packed up around sunset. My girlfriend and I sat outside with a tiny lantern, watching stars start to creep in through the treetops. Sometime around 10:30, I went to brush my teeth at the bathroom hut. It was a short walk, maybe 90 seconds from our tent. just long enough for the lantern light to fade behind me as I made my way in the dark. The building itself was basically a concrete box with a flickering fluorescent overhead and a single stall. No mirrors, no sinks, just the basics. As I stood there brushing, I heard something outside. A footstep, software gravel crunching. I assumed it was another camper heading over, but when I stepped outside to head back, no one was there. I turned my headlamp on and scanned the woods. Nothing. But that prickly feeling hit me, like someone was still nearby, watching. I walked back to the tent a little faster than I normally would have. When I got back, my girlfriend was already zipped inside. She said she was feeling cold, so I climbed in and we settled under the blankets. Around midnight, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. It was that sudden, bolt-upright kind of wake-up, like my brain had hit a tripwire. My girlfriend was still asleep. That's when I heard it. A giggle. Not loud, not playful, just a dry, breathy giggle, the kind kids do when they think they're being sneaky. I slowly turned toward the mesh window of the tent. And there she was, the girl, standing just outside the tent, her face half lit by the moonlight. Smiling. She wasn't doing anything, just staring straight through the mesh. I sat there frozen. My mind immediately started racing. What the hell is she doing? Is she lost? Was she sleepwalking? Where were her parents? I whispered my girlfriend's name. No response. I didn't want to unzip the tent. Something deep in my chest told me not to. Instead, I sat up and said, as calmly as I could, "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't answer, just tilted her head slightly, still smiling. I reached slowly for the flashlight next to the sleeping bag, turned it on, and aimed it through the mesh. She was gone. No footsteps, no rustling, just gone. I unzipped the tent halfway and peeked out, scanning the tree line with the light. Nothing. The woods were still. The kind of still that makes your skin crawl, like the trees were holding their breath. I woke my girlfriend and told her what I saw. She said I must have been dreaming, that it was a trick of the light. I wanted to believe her. The next morning, I asked the older couple if they had grandkids with them. They looked confused, said it was just the two of them, always had been. I asked the solo hiker too. He said no. He'd been out there for 2 days and hadn't seen anyone younger than 30. That didn't sit right with me. I decided to walk the trail where I'd first seen the girl the night before. Maybe she'd come from one of the nearby forest access paths. About 10 minutes in, I found something. A sock. White. Small. Stuck in the branches of a bush like someone had tossed it, or it had snagged on the way through. I took a picture of it and left it where it was. Back at the site, I told my girlfriend I wanted to leave early. I didn't explain everything, just said I didn't feel great about the spot. We packed up and hit the road. A few weeks later, back home, I found myself thinking about the campground, about the girl, that blank smile, that giggle. Out of curiosity, I searched the name of the campground online. Third result down was a forum post, old, dated almost 6 years ago. It was a thread titled, "Anyone else seen the little girl near campground name?" The user described exactly what I'd seen. White shirt, gray shorts, appears at night, smiles but doesn't speak. There were 3 comments. The last one was from someone who claimed to be a former park ranger. He said that years ago, a family had gone missing in that area. Parents were found in their tent, having died of carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty camp stove. Their daughter was never found. No trace, no body, just gone. The ranger wrote, "There were reports in the months after of people seeing a girl alone in the trees. We searched the area with dogs. Nothing. It was like she vanished. We always assumed she wandered off and got lost, but the sightings. They kept happening. I stopped working there after the third one. I still have the photo of the sock on my phone. Sometimes I wonder if I should have taken it, turned it in, tried to look harder, but a deeper part of me is glad I didn't, because whatever I saw in those woods, whatever smiled at me through the mesh, it wasn't looking for help. It was looking for someone to stay, and maybe, just maybe, someone eventually did.